This week on Vaticano, Pope Francis speaks in defense of life from conception to natural death during his annual speech to world diplomats. Learn about how Poles are defending the unborn through a billboard ad campaign. And discover the role of music in liturgy with Vatican official and liturgist, Msgr Enda Murphy. For this and more, Vaticano starts now. Pope Francis, as his predecessors, begins every year with an important speech to the diplomatic corps accredited to the Holy See. On February the 8th, 183 ambassadors heard him give his perspective on how to approach what he sees as the most pressing issues of our time: climate change and economical and political crises.
It
is therefore necessary for all political and religious leaders to set aside their personal interests and to commit themselves to pursuing justice and implementing real reforms for the good of their fellow citizens, acting transparently and taking responsibility for their actions.
Pope Francis also urged protection of human life in every phase.
The pandemic forced us to confront two unavoidable dimensions of human existence: sickness and death. In doing so, it reminded us of the value of life, of every individual human life and its dignity at every moment of its earthly pilgrimage, from conception in the womb until its natural end.
The ambassador of Kazakhstan to the Holy See, Mr. Alibek Bakayev, was among those present for the Pope's speech. As a newly accredited ambassador, it was his first time hearing the so-called State of the World address in person.
A large selection of the Pope's speech was devoted to questions of political crises, especially the conflicts that we have on our earth today. The Pope gave his vision of how such conflicts could be resolved peacefully and diplomatically, and what role religion plays in this.
He says that Pope Francis' vision coincides with that of the first president of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev. In 2003, Nazarbayev established the Congress of the Leaders of World and Traditional Religions to discuss and promote peace. In fact, Pope John Paul II personally supported the Congress and said that Kazakhstan has a mission to be a bridge among nations and religions.
I viaggi apostolici, cominciando con quello in Iraq.
I would like to focus separately on what he said about the importance of promoting interreligious cooperation. Today the Pope spoke briefly about his plans to go on his first international visit to Iraq. The ambassador of Iraq was sitting next to me and I congratulated him. I said it is an honor when a Pope has the opportunity to go to visit your country. As ambassador of Kazakhstan, I can probably speak because we welcomed the Pope in 2001.
This year marks 20 years since St. John Paul II's visit to Kazakhstan in 2001, and 30 years since it became an independent state. The ambassador said he hopes Pope Francis will also find time to visit Kazakhstan soon.
Officially, the invitation will be handed to the Pope by our leaders. It is a tradition. The chairman of the Senate of the Parliament of Kazakhstan will come with an official visit, and on behalf of the President will handle the invitation to the Pope to participate in the Congress. The 7th Congress of Leaders of World and Traditional Religions will be held in 2022.
At the beginning of this year, the Kazakh government made reforms in both the political and social spheres. The registration of opposition political parties has been simplified, and NGOs and charitable organizations are now receiving more government support.
If to speak concretely, the point is about these kinds of charitable organizations or volunteer organizations. They can receive facilities which are in state properties in a simplified order. The instrument of financing has expanded and been simplified. It concerns both state money and money from the business community. These are some new possibilities, unique possibilities, which give the chance and opens the way to these charitable and voluntary organizations to develop their activity in Kazakhstan.
И открывает путь этим благотворительным волонтерским организациям развивать свою деятельность в Казахстане.
The ambassador hopes that these measures will help the Catholic Church's charitable mission and that the cooperation with the Vatican will help to better integrate Catholics into the rapidly developing multicultural and multi-religious society of Kazakhstan. To mark the anniversary of the visit of Pope St. John Paul II, the government of Kazakhstan, together with the Catholic Church and the Embassy of Poland, launched an exhibition on Pope John Paul II called the Pope of Dialogue. The opening ceremony of the exhibition took place in the very hall where Kazakhstan's President Nazarbayev received Pope John Paul II 2 decades ago. The exhibition is divided up into different topics that show Pope John Paul II's work in the field of peace and dialogue. After the break, we'll explore how the Catholic Church is contributing to the ProLife mission in the birthplace of St. John Paul II, Poland. In a few moments, we'll be back with more on Vaticano. Polish pro-lifers have started a billboard campaign supporting the decision of Poland's constitutional tribunal to ban abortion for fetuses with abnormalities. The decision went into effect on January 27th. Polish journalist and pro-life activist Magdalena Kurczewska-Kaliszuk says the campaign aims to remind people how precious human life is.
We can observe in Poland a huge impact of an amazing campaign with over 5,000 posters all over Poland, posters with a baby in a heart, a very, very easy picture, a picture which is definitely life-saving.
The court's verdict prompted a wave of demonstrations across Poland, where the protesters directed their anger not only towards the government, but also towards those individuals who supported the decision.
Abortion lobby is very angry with this campaign. It's one of proofs that this campaign is very efficient. It provokes to think about human life, to think about a baby before the birth, and such a campaign is a great inspiration for Poland and for other countries to show the beauty of human life. Sometimes it's enough to convince people that each human life is worth of saving and worth of life.
The chairman of the family section of the Polish Bishops' Conference, Bishop Wiesław Msgr, says that Catholics have a moral duty to protect human life.
Therefore, the Church has the obligation, in a pluralistic world where there are many different kinds of voices, to be a very strong, clear voice, even a voice of opposition, that life demands protection and care at every stage of its development.
Bishop Msgr says that words are not enough. Actions are also needed. This is why the Church in Poland currently runs a large number of social and health centers to support families in need.
To help families and women.
The new regulation cannot be appealed, And Lech Kowalewski, an activist from Human Life International Poland, explains the reasons behind such a decision.
First of all, that the right to life is the most important right of every human being. And if there is a conflict of rights, for example, right to well-being or the right to comfortable life or even the so-called reproductive rights, they are of a lower importance in comparison to the right to life. And this is universal.
Pope Francis supported Poland's pro-life efforts by welcoming Polish pilgrims that came to celebrate the 100th anniversary of St. John Paul II's birth on October the 28th.
Through the intercession of Mary Most Holy and the Holy Polish Pontiff, I ask God to inspire in the hearts of all respect for the life of our brothers, especially of the most fragile and defenseless, and to give strength to those who welcome it and take care of it, even when it requires heroic love.
Dio vi benedica.
Data from the Polish Ministry of Health shows that in 2019, the probability of children with Down syndrome accounted for 40% of all abortions in the country. For Polish pro-life activists, this data points to eugenics, and for them, it's unacceptable. The tribunal has also stated that the burden of raising a severely and irreversibly handicapped or terminally ill child should not fall only on the child's family, but be shared by society as a whole. One of the greatest polls of the 20th century is being celebrated in 2021. The country of Poland is dedicating this entire year to the memory of Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński.
We all hope this will be also a year of his beatification.
In 2019, Pope Francis approved a miracle that would lead to the beatification of Cardinal Wyszyński, moving him one step closer to sainthood. Plans were in place to beatify him in June of 2020, but due to the pandemic, it was postponed. Małgorzata Smolak, a member of the Wyszyński Institute, promotes the Cardinal's legacy. Cardinal Wyszyński was born in a tiny Polish town called Zudzela in 1901. He grew up in a poor but strongly Catholic family. His father had a strong devotion to Our Lady of Częstochowa, and this love of Mary passed on to Stefan.
Who was Cardinal Wyszyński for Poland and for the Polish nation? First of all, he was a man of great faith, heroic faith. He trusted God in every moment of his life, even when he was imprisoned for 3 years by communist government.
The cause of imprisonment was Stefan Wyszyński's tireless defense of the Catholic Church's independence from the Polish government during the 1950s. Despite this injustice, he continued to love.
Second thing, he encouraged us very strongly to love each other. He wrote in his diary from the prison, "They will not force me to hate anyone." Cardinal Wyszyński also stood strongly for human dignity. Once he said, "As much as the society, nation and state has trust in God, that much has respect for human being."
He's called the Primate of the Millennium because he served as the Primate of Poland for 33 years. from 1948 until his death in 1981. Cardinal Wyszynski was also a mentor and a friend to Karol Wojtyła, the future Pope St. John Paul II. Both were committed to building the spiritual and political well-being of their native Poland.
His big joy was the election of Cardinal Wojtyła for Pope. And John Paul II said about Cardinal Wyszynski, "There would be no Pope from Poland on this St. Peter's capital if not your faith, which didn't step back from the imprisonment and suffering, your heroic hope, your trust to Mother of Church." His life and preaching is the guideline for us today. It is still actual for our present day.
Wyszynski worked as a chaplain in the Home Army, which was the underground resistance movement, and he helped to organize the Catholic Union of Young Workers and the union group Solidarność, which would lead to the collapse of the communist government. This mission of love and service to his homeland is why Poland is dedicating this year to Wyszynski.
Another important feature of Cardinal Wyszynski is his great love to Poland. Once he said, "I love my motherland more than my heart." He trusted Mother of God very much. He even gave himself in her enslavement. He trusted her every case of Polish church, and he was seeking for this trust for the whole world as well.
The Polish people hope for the beatification of their father of the fatherland in 2021, which marks the 120th anniversary of the Cardinal's birth and the 40th anniversary of his death.
But also you have that.
When we return, Msgr Enda Murphy explains the connection between music and the liturgy in light of the 4th International Conference on Music. We'll be back after a short break with more on Vaticano. The International Conference on Music, promoted by the Pontifical Council for Culture, celebrates the importance of music in everyday life and in the liturgy. Due to the ongoing COVID pandemic, this year's 4th edition of the conference was held online. Pope Francis sent a video message reflecting on the theme of the conference, texts and contexts.
Nella liturgia siamo invitati all'ascolto della parola di Dio.
In the liturgy, we are invited to listen to the Word of God. The Word is our text. The main text, the community, is our context. The Word is the source of sense. It enlightens and guides the journey of the community. We know how necessary it is to tell the story of salvation in languages and idioms that can be understood. Music, too, can help the biblical text to speak in new and different cultural contexts, so that the divine word can effectively reach minds and hearts.
Efficace le menti e i cuori.
Pope Francis is urging musicians to use their talents and vocations to help evangelize and guide people on their paths to hearing God's voice. Msgr Enda Murphy from the Vatican's Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments told EWTN that music is an essential part of the liturgy because it's a way of praising God.
The renewed Missal, the Missal of Paul VI, the Missal of the Second Vatican Council, the ordinary form of the Mass, the normative form of the Mass, as foreseen in that Missal, is the sung Mass. So the Church is already making a statement about how important singing is. But also you have that, but also you have the responsibility of the local conferences. It's up to them to ensure that there are hymns and music there that are worthy of the liturgy.
The aim of the conference was to emphasize the important role of music in the liturgy and rediscover the rich tradition of the Roman Rite.
St. Paul VI said in 1965, he said the Church was making a great sacrifice by, by not using the Latin language all the time. But he said it was in the service of an even greater universal calling, the calling to reach out to all people, and so that they could understand and be active participants in the liturgy. But my fundamental point was that it's the move from Latin to local isn't a one-way street. You just don't buy a one-way ticket. There has to be a journey of return. So the Latin liturgical books, which are produced by the Congregation for Divine Worship, the typical editions, the Missal in Latin, the Liturgy of the Hours in Latin, it's the responsibility of the local bishops' conferences to translate them.
Msgr Murphy said that music actually forms our belief and is meant to direct our hearts and minds to God.
There is the old saying that the law of prayer establishes the law of belief. So if you look through the whole library of the liturgical books of the Roman Rite and allow yourself to be, and pray them, more importantly, if you pray them, if you participate in that prayer, if you're truly involved in that prayer, then you're being formed, you're becoming ever more deeply grown into the mystery of encountering the risen Christ in the liturgy, and that is what is at the heart of it.